Are you a woman in the corporate world striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cece George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lowndes, CEO and founder, imposter syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lowndes Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time.
Hello, and welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. Rachel, it's so good to see you. What's going on?
Hi, Cece. All good here with me, working away like a boss because that's what winners do. How are you?
Oh, yes. And you are a winner, working away like a boss. That is the exact mentality that I've always known you for. So no surprise there. I think we're still kind of at the top of the new year. And I know for many organizations here in the US, especially, the new year means new budgets, and many of them do begin a massive hiring, typically in January. I would say people who are job hunting might also be waiting for their 2024 bonuses to pay out before they actually give their notice. That's quite common. And that's why we're talking about a topic that can be super frustrating. It can be grueling. It can be taxing and exhausting, but oh so necessary. And that would be the great job hunt. I mean, even just looking at my own history, every time I start a job hunt, I go through all those motions, right? For example, I'm combing LinkedIn, combing Glassdoor, every job board you can think of. And what happens? I apply endlessly, and for all I know, these applications are just going into an endless gaping black hole, right? I mean, there's really only one of two things that might happen, which, I find in my experience is, really my only options. The first, and this is probably going to be very common and very familiar for people listening, is that you get that auto rejection email. And every time I get an email from the company name and the subject line reads, "Thank you for your interest," I know automatically, delete.
Yeah, it's definitely a process, isn't it? The whole job hunt thing.
I don't think you would miss it because it certainly is. And again, in all my years of going through this process of the job hunting and going through all those auto rejection emails, I have maybe only ever really heard from a handful of recruiters, meaning someone actually typed me an email and said, "Thank you for applying. We have decided to go with other candidates." And this is something that I started to do in more recent years, but I thought, okay, you know what? I can very simply reply and say, "Great, thank you for letting me know." But I decided to take more action and seek out feedback. So I've started to do that, and it's really actually been very, very helpful. So that's the other outcome that could happen is you actually get this correspondence from a live human, which I mean, again, that doesn't really happen very often. So
No, I mean, it doesn't. And there's actually a lot of talk about the job market and how candidates are being treated at the moment. I mean, if you go onto LinkedIn, you will see like a bunch of people sharing their experiences of looking for work and how hard it's been. And I know people who've been out of work for over a year, and I know for certain that they are trying everything they can to get a job. So, I really do admire people for that, because looking for a job is a full-time job, right? It's
It is.
very intense. People spend time looking at postings, researching companies, researching the people, the hiring managers, crafting CVs and cover letters, going that extra mile to reach out to the hiring managers to connect and like start a conversation. It's really a lot of energy, and to be ignored is really demoralizing for some, especially when you are putting so much time and energy into it, And I mean, it does seem like that maybe the market is flooded with candidates, especially over the last 12 months, because I think last year was quite a difficult year for businesses. And, there were a lot of redundancies I definitely saw that on LinkedIn. And so we're talking about a market that's got very smart, good quality, intelligent, experienced people here who are struggling to find work. And that's probably something that they haven't really encountered much of in their lives, in their careers. So, if you thought looking for a new role was hard before, I think it's a whole different board game now. And, there's stories of ghosting and reposting roles after people have interviewed for them. They've done the whole interview process, which can be lengthy for some roles. And then they're given the thanks, but we filled it spiel, only to see the role advertised again. Like, I don't know what that's about, right? Imagine seeing that. I mean, that's really just going to chip away at your confidence, right? I mean, that's just one example, but it feels like it's a bit like the Wild West out there. I don't know what you think.
For sure. And you're right. It's so saturated. I've actually heard of more people who are on a job hunt now more than I've ever heard before. I recently actually just heard from a friend of mine whose friend of hers was a VP at, the name of the company is escaping me, but she was a VP. She was in that role for well over 10 years. She got laid off. And this is a woman who has so much experience. And she's been on the hunt for more than 6 months now. But again, with that example, she's at a VP level. So, depending on what you're looking for, it can just add to the complexity of all of this. And I do think, for that reason of the market being so saturated, that's why it's so hard for companies to respond, because there's just so much more to sift through. I mean, they get hundreds of applications pretty much every day, every week, and they're just trying to do their best to keep on top of it. There was this one particular job hunt that I was on a couple of years ago where I kept an actual Excel file, and I recorded every job I applied to, the company, the salary, the location, my user ID and password to get into the site. And then I monitored when I applied, when I got the rejection email or whatever email I got. When I looked at that spreadsheet, that tracker, I had more than 130 jobs that I applied. And that was in a very short amount of time. And if you had seen the amount of responses I got back, or I should say, how little responses I got back, you would have been like, wow, like what you said before, it's a lot of work to put in, but yet it's very needed, right? And, I think when you're putting forward as many seeds or submissions, aka applications that you can, it goes beyond just applying online. So that's just one modality. I think you also have to reach out to people, tap into your network, talk to people, because people are sharing more information by word of mouth. Something might come up in a conversation with someone and they may say, you know what, I actually know someone who does that kind of work. Let me connect you. So you're probably more likely to get some kind of, progression if you attack the process from multiple modalities, as opposed to just going through the standard online job applying process.
Totally agree.
But, and then when I think about the job application process itself, so you have your standard job description, and I think companies are getting really, really lengthy with what they're requiring. If you look at the list of requirements, the bullet points are never ending. And when I thought about, which jobs I was applying to in the past, It struck me. I started to feel really strongly that, the application should be really based upon hiring someone for their character, because while I may not check every single box, I'm a person that I have that character, and whatever gaps, few gaps, I think, if I'm being really honest, whatever few gaps I might have, I can learn on the job. I'm a really quick learner. So I'm a really big proponent. And this is not something that I came up with. It was something I heard Lori Greiner from Shark Tank. I think she is more notable for saying this, that you hire on character and train on skill. So I do think that, you do have to have the right character. I would say you need some level of qualification. You can't just go in blindly and say, "Hey, I'm your ideal character. Hire me." You need to have some foundation. But I do
think I'm a good person.
Yeah, just because my awesomeness is so obvious, right? I do think you need to have some basic level and some, experience and credentialing there. But I do think it's more about, finding someone who has the right attributes, and whatever few things that may be a gap, you can always build on that afterwards. What's been your experience? I mean, you've been, out of this field, out of the game of looking for a job, I think, for quite some time. But what has been your experience when you've had to job hunt in the past?
Look, to be fair, I am a unicorn. So
That you are. I do think you are.
I have a very specific set of skills, and usually, in the field that I worked in, which was advertising, there would really only be one of me in the advertising agencies that I worked in. So, my experience is probably, it's maybe not like how other people experience the job market, because it is quite a specific set of skills. There aren't that many people who do what I do, and fortunately, I have gained a reputation for being very, very good at my job, which I am. I'm a complete gun, and I own that, and anyone can challenge me on that if they want, but you just have to ask the people I've worked with, right? But even the people who don't like me.
Really?
Yeah. No, I've been very lucky in my career in that respect. I mean, I've really only had to do a handful of interviews. And I mean, I don't think I'm very good at interviews, to be honest with you. I mean, most of the time I haven't been successful when I've done the interviews, but and that's because I really haven't done them. I'll be honest, right? But when I have, it's usually come down to like me and another candidate. I get to the last two, and in that, on those occasions, it has been down to like a box ticking type thing. Like they may have got a different skill set to me, and that is more valuable to the person who, the company that's employing. But mostly I've achieved my long-term positions through starting as a contractor, right? And then, I've gone in because they've got an immediate need. They need someone. I get put forward by people that I've previously worked with. Like I'll get in touch with Rachel. And then obviously I'm a gun. So they asked me to stay. And I'm really not making that up, right?
I know you are. I really believe that. He is a gun, everyone.
Yeah. Everyone, I'm a gun.
How is that going to come across? I have no idea.
It's not about me injecting some sunshine up my own bum. But actually, this has been true throughout my career since I started working, right? So there's a bit of a pattern there. But I think my subconscious strategy maybe was to try and avoid the interview process at all costs and take that other route, which, has worked out really well for me so far. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a very different experience.
You're right. When I think about just in the time that we've been, getting to know each other and we become friends and now working together, I think your skills really are so nuanced. So that, but it's a really good tip though, that when you're a contractor or doing any kind of freelance work, essentially the company gets to see what value you bring, and they're kind of sort of like you test drive the car right before you buy it. It's sort of like that same sentiment. So it's I can see how companies would bring you on as a contractor and then keep you on longer term because of how great you are. So, and that could be an option for some people who have the kind of flexible lifestyle that would be conducive to working as a freelancer or a contract professional. But this is exactly why I think it's important for us to talk about this, because I think we also need to be upfront and open about employers being realistic with their list of requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're posting for a job, they have to really consider what are we actually needing to fill this role, to do this work. And then even list out maybe some, some employers say like desired qualifications, so like the bonuses or what have you. But in my experience, when I've perused job postings and I see a list of qualifications that's like 15 bullet points down, I'm like, okay, I can't. Like, I'm already like tired looking at that, And so it's not encouraging for people to apply, because you're like, well, great. If I don't check boxes 8 through 15, I'm not even going to get a phone interview. That's where it becomes really frustrating.
Yeah, I think, with that desired thing, I mean, are they really desired these days? It feels like they kind of put that, and then your kind of criteria is based on whether you actually meet all of those desired ones. So
you are correct. You are correct. That's actually a way for employers to tell you no when you don't meet the desired qualifications. They're like, oh, we actually went with someone else because they had the desired qualifications. And you're like, well, can you just make that part of the list, the regular list?
So I have to meet all of the qualifications and all of the desired, which by their very nature they're desired. So if I don't meet them, I don't meet them. It's very interesting, because I think hiring managers are really getting into the detail of what they want. From what I hear, right? Obviously, I'm not job hunting, and so they're only hiring on the basis that that person has ticked every single box of the lists of wants and desires, which, if you think about it, that's a little bit insane, because if you hire a person who can already do, I mean, everything, like literally everything on that list, then there is no growth for that person, right? So it kind of, you're hiring someone that can do everything. They're not going to grow. They might get bored. It's a little bit repetitive and robotic for them. And you're potentially missing out on great people. If you'd set your hiring criteria and plan to like open up the space a little bit more and actually go, those are desired. So if someone has one on the desired, great. If they have two, even better. But,
exactly.
kind of to our point, what we're talking about, right?
For sure. Yeah, I've seen, I've seen this more recently. I've seen employers include in their job posting, if you don't meet every qualification, we still encourage you to apply.
Oh, yeah.
Which at first glance, I'm like, wow, that is actually encouraging, because I wasn't going to apply before, but maybe I'll apply now. But then when I get your auto rejection email, it makes me wonder, okay, if we're not even going to have a conversation, why was I encouraged to apply?
I think that's an optics thing, isn't it? It's like keeping it open for everybody. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of value in really kind of opening up the space to talk to other people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who you're missing out on, right? And you want people to be encouraged to apply. Like you want them to apply, so that even if they don't meet the criteria, then at least try and give them some feedback, especially to people who have been through an interview process with you. I mean, obviously there's a lot of candidates in the market. There's hundreds of applications going in. It's very difficult to be able to give feedback to everybody. But I think the people who've turned up to an interview, taken time, all that kind of thing, and then they don't make it, especially give them feedback on why they didn't progress, because otherwise they're just left with this like, what's wrong with me? Like that can really happen, like what's wrong with me, that kind of thing. And it's kind of not fair on the candidate, and they're not going to be able to move forward. So I mean, I know that hiring managers out there probably do wish for this to be different, and they could give feedback. Some of them are very, very kind and do want to go that extra mile and provide that information. But of course, it's not possible for everybody. So, but yeah, as I say, the interview process, if you've done that, if someone's been through that, do them a solid, give them some feedback.
Yeah, and then, going back to your point earlier of when you said, well, if I ticked every box and I
Mm,
met every qualification, why would I apply? Because I've already done that job. So there would be no
mm,
point to me applying and getting hired only to get bored and then to leave. I
yeah.
also think, if I'm applying for, say, for example, for some senior executive level corporate suite position from the level I'm at right now, that would make sense because I'm trying to stretch myself. And I believe I have transferable skills that will be conducive and really effective in that role. But
Mhm.
how would I get that relevant experience if I'm never hired for the job?
Right.
So that's why I really believe more and more that, you are more than what your resume says, but your resume is really just a way to get you in the door and start the conversation. So obviously there's going to be lots of professionals out there offering services on coaching and getting your resume built up. And even when you are in the door, I think when you're in that interview, it's so tricky because they're being asked all these behavioral questions, and the recruiter is trying to gauge your character and see if you can be trainable, if you're missing something. And again, that's what I remember from what Lori Greiner said. She said it so artfully in one of her episodes about she's a big believer of hiring on character and training on skill.
Mhm.
And I think, you really just have to give people a chance. But, for whatever reason, corporations make these hiring decisions. And, honestly, some of the job postings are just there just to be posted. They already have a candidate identified, someone internal, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a niece, I don't know, but they have to post the job for legality reasons. So,
Mm.
it's really quite the intense experience.
Yeah. Uh, I mean,
Next.
my mind is blown by this whole thing. Like, I'm literally talking to some of my friends who are on the job market now, and I get the stories. I hear the stories from them, and I just think I don't know how to respond to this because
Right.
what do you do? It's like, is why is that job being reposted when you've interviewed for? I mean, I don't know. I think I'd be like ringing them up, going, right, what's going on, man? I'm pretty direct that way.
You know what? Actually, that reminds me. I did have an experience some time ago. I'm not sure, maybe a few years back, where I interviewed with a company, and the position was based elsewhere, and I was obviously living somewhere else. But it wasn't mandatory from the job description that you had to be on site at that location, which
Right.
is why I applied. Because if
Hmm.
it's posted that way, that you're going to get more candidates
Hmm.
only to go through the process of having two interviews, and the
Wow.
company has now changed its direction to say, you know what, we actually need this person on site. Well, wouldn't that have been a good conversation to have before you'd post the job? I'm just
Yes.
saying. I mean, why
Yeah.
waste someone's time and get their hopes
Uh,
up?
yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously maybe they had a realization, but as you say, like I think being clear about what you want. I mean, working in advertising, jobs come and go quickly. You think you're
Mhm.
going to win a client, or you think a big project's coming in, you suddenly need people, then it doesn't land, blah blah blah. This does happen.
Right,
But like kind of going to the back to the point of a hire on character, train on skill, right? I mean,
right.
you can be the best candidate on paper, tick all the boxes, but that's going to be irrelevant if you're an asshole and totally disrupt the culture, right? So, that is a really important point to be making, and you can train people if you get the right person who has the right attitude and contributes to your
Right,
culture and your company goals in a positive way. Because skills are skills, right? They are
right.
by their very nature skills. They can be learnt. And, some people are better at learning than others. Some people are not so good. And that, again, comes down to an attitude. But
Oh,
people are
sure.
fundamentally are essential. Who people are is fundamentally essential to know because one person can single handedly dismantle a company's culture in a matter of months. Like it's just the
Oh,
bad
yes.
apple in the car, right?
Yes, I'm sure we've all seen that bad apple play out in real life.
Yeah.
And you're right, skills are learned. And that's why it makes me think if I check every box and met every qualification, there would be no point in me applying for those jobs. It just doesn't make any sense, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not going to encourage growth in any way. So that
No.
person's going to get bored, and then potentially they are the person who becomes negative in your culture. Because as humans, we need to be challenged, and if you're not challenged, then you might become the challenger.
Of course. I actually heard someone recently say, I'm not a problem solver, I'm a problem starter. I was like,
Ooh.
oh, that is really intriguing. I like that. I start the problems. Maybe it's just the way that she phrased it, but I think she meant she disrupts the
Yeah.
thinking, So I thought it was a
Yeah.
really cool play on words.
Yeah.
So, we spent some time talking about this wonderful experience of job hunting and how exhausting it can be and frustrating to go through all those motions. And, based on our collective experience, I think we can, you and I can really share some strategies to help our listeners in their job search.
Yeah.
Well, when I thought about strategies and tips that I would pass on to anyone looking for a new job, my mind immediately goes to if you're currently in a job and you're looking for another opportunity, I think you have to first understand what is motivating you to leave your current role. Like, what are you not getting or don't think you'll get in your current role that is now forcing you to leave? And that's something that I've been more intentional about over the last few years as I've grown in my career. When I was younger, I remember there were specific experience I had in different jobs where I felt almost threatened by the people I was working for. And the environment just it felt very toxic and was becoming too much and too stressful. I wasn't getting along with that boss. And in those experiences, those situations, my instinct is flight. I have to leave because this environment is no longer conducive to me showing up as an authentic person. And when I think about that flight response of I have to find a new job right away, I'm really running away from something. I'm
Yeah.
not giving myself the opportunity to confront what it is that I am thinking is a motivator to leave. But there's actually a lesson to be learned there. And in that particular scenario, it's really about how do I manage up because I'm working with this who I thought was a difficult boss. Well, I have to learn how to manage those relationships because not everyone's going to be easy, right? So you learn those essential skills by sticking through it. And, the collaboration piece, the relationship management, stakeholder management, the managing up, all of those experiences only make us stronger and better qualified professionals.
100%. And it's very important to highlight there, Cece, that sometimes we have something that's activated in us and a part of us that we might need to meet and resolve. So it's really important to understand, why are we making that decision to leave, or whatever it is that we've come up with? And is it because we do need to learn something new, or we are being made to feel uncomfortable because there's something
Right.
inside of us? And if so, is this something we can work through rather than avoid and run away from? Because
Right.
whatever you run away from, you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to find that challenge somewhere else, right?
Yep.
So it's really about, we're getting a little bit spiritual here, but it's really about meeting it and integrating it through, transmuting it, transforming it
Right.
into something else. So is it a job change that's needed, or is it a new approach to what you're doing, perhaps, right?
Correct.
Now, obviously, if the job is no longer inspiring you and you specifically want to do something else, that's a different story, right? So
Right.
that is a good reason to look somewhere else. And maybe the boss, or the fact you're not getting on with the boss or the team, is a catalyst for that. That's a good reason to look for somewhere else. And what next for you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, you're right. You will meet that same challenge again if you don't confront it head on. So why run away from it? Just confront it and learn a new skill, right? Managing up. I also do think people get stale and outgrow their roles. So it makes sense to look for something bigger or different that will just keep you motivated and engaged in the work.
Yeah.
I also think that when you're job hunting, you have to keep things in mind, like the time of year, socioeconomic conditions, etc. All those factors affect your experience as a candidate. There was one time where I had started my job hunt about a month before the holidays. And then it frustrated me when I wouldn't hear back about the status of my application. And it was because people were winding down their year and essentially recruitment became a January problem, right? But I'm not realizing that. Or sometimes, again, it's the reality that, like I said before, when jobs get posted, sometimes they're just posted and they already have a candidate identified. So those rejections aren't about you at all. You have to take these things with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors at play. We can never really be in control of how anything plays out. And, I'm not saying don't be strategic as possible, but know that you are only half the equation, right? We make it mean a lot about who we are, right? And, you can only do the best you can to your ability. And then it's kind of out of your hands. So if someone isn't responding, it's not really necessarily about you, right? And we have this, it's like when you go on a dating app, right, and you go swipe, so you won't know anything about this, but swipe, and then you say yes to someone and you send them a message and then they don't respond and you're like, why? You're a number of many,
So, right. Another notch to the belt.
Yeah.
It is completely out of your hands. You're absolutely right. Wherever you are in your career journey, we hope that you can take away these insights from today's episode. Don't give up, friends. Job hunting is a process. It is exhausting, overwhelming, frustrating, disappointing. It's all the things. Acknowledge it, but you can't give up. Sometimes you just have to trust the process. I do think, and I'm a personal believer, that things happen and things line up for a reason. So even if one job that you thought was going to be your dream job or the almighty job doesn't work out, there is still another one out there for you. I also think you can't just rely on job boards like the LinkedIns and the Indeeds and the Glassdoors to find jobs. This is about selling yourself. This whole process is about how good you can sell yourself. And you do that by talking to people. So let other people know that you're in the job market and be specific about what you are looking for. And I would say, do not be afraid to tap into your network and reconnect with folks to share this new status with them. And you never know who they might know that could be hiring for exactly what you're looking for. But you won't know that unless you put it out into the universe. And if you don't, the universe can't respond.
Oh, so true. I mean, what I would add to that is that, kind of following on with that networking thing is networking, or out in the wild, as I like to call it. I like to say that I'm better in the wild. That's a really excellent way to find work. And, I reckon I have found most of my opportunities this way. So don't be afraid to get out there. I know this can be scary for some people, or the introverts out there, but with the right strategy and some simple tools, you can master networking. You just really you need to just know what you're saying and who are the right people you want to be connecting with, because it can drain your energy. Also, I would say, make your LinkedIn profile work harder for you, right? I see so many people with half-cut profiles, and this is only because they don't know how to make it work for them. If you're applying for jobs on LinkedIn, what are they going to do? They're going to look at your LinkedIn profile, and if your LinkedIn profile isn't working for you because you haven't finished it or you haven't got it in a place where it actually showcases who you are, then you're just cutting your own legs off, right? It's like trying to run a marathon and cutting your legs off halfway through. So
Can't do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to win that way. So there are ways that you can do this. It's not hard. It's just a few simple tweaks where you can have a profile that really stands out and does a lot of the legwork for you. Now, if anyone does want any tips around that, I am a top voice on LinkedIn. I have all the information on the LinkedIn playbooks and tools. So just reach out. I do a Level Up Your LinkedIn Game program, which I'm running at the moment. So I'll be running another one. So if you want some help with that, just hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn, Rachel Lowndes.
Friends, take her up on that offer. You will not regret it. Shameless plug.
Yeah, always.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. If we can leave you with a thought, if you are in the market for that next opportunity, what can you do differently with your job search based on what you've heard today? If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you can share it with your friends and tag us on social media at Leading Ladies Who Lunch. Your reviews of this podcast mean so much to us. We'd love it if you can rate it and subscribe to the show.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. Subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and follow us on Instagram at Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Stay tuned for another great episode in 2 weeks.
Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And remember, the conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.